Hello. This is my first time posting here, so I'm sorry if I'm doing things wrong. My girlfriend and I recently visited my family in Oregon. She hadn't met my parents yet and we both wanted a break from the city, so we decided why not, let's have some fun in the country. My parents offered to let us stay in their guest house on Mount Hood. I declined and suggested to my girlfriend we stay in a hotel instead. She is a fan of the paranormal and I knew she'd enjoy a stay in my hometown's famously haunted hotel. In fact, you can thank her for this post. She convinced me to tell my story here. To my surprise, she wanted to stay in my family's guest house. I told her I'd rather we didn't, and when she pressed as to why, I cobbled together some poor excuse about mountain lion problems on the property. A week had gone by and my girlfriend still wanted to make the trip. My parents understood my reservations with the guest house, but felt I should grow up and get over the issues I had with the place. If we would be staying in the guest house, I had to come clean to my girlfriend about it, so on the drive to Oregon, I told her about the summer my family spent in the guest house trying to cure my uncle of lycanthropy. On June 19th, my parents received a phone call in the middle of the night. They came into my room, woke me, dressed me, and loaded me into the back of the car. They told me my Uncle Red would be in town and that we'd be spending the summer camping. My parents' house is roughly a 45-minute drive along Highway 45 to their guest house on Mount Hood. The guest house is what it's called now, but it had been the home my grandparents lived and raised their kids in. They left the house to their kids, who shared it amongst themselves in the form of a guest/vacation home for family members visiting from out of state or for anyone who wanted to spend a weekend at Timberline Lodge skiing. I had fallen asleep on the drive to the house, but woke up to my aunt, not Red's wife, he is single, opening the door and unbuckling me. My two other uncles sat on the front steps, both smoking and animated while they talked to my parents. My aunt led me past them and around to the back French doors which opened into the kitchen. The doors to the family room had been closed and chained. From inside I could hear people yelling and the cries of my uncle while he pleaded for help. His voice cracked, he stuttered and choked while he cried for someone to do something. My aunt locked us in one of the upstairs rooms along with her two kids who sat in the corner of the room by the fireplace crying. My aunt reassured us everything would be okay, that Uncle Red is just sick and he'd be better tomorrow. The sounds of my uncle screaming and crying kept us all awake. We finally fell asleep once the sun came up. I didn't sleep long. I woke to an empty room and the smell of breakfast and the sounds of my family talking downstairs. I got out of bed and made my way into the kitchen. I felt like I had awakened from a bad dream, like the sounds from last night hadn't happened at all. My family sat around the table laughing and eating, and I mean everyone. Uncle Red leaned against the island drinking his coffee and talking with my dad. I had no idea what had happened. Tired and confused by the situation, I broke down and cried. My mom scooped me up and carried me back upstairs. Lycanthropy means different things to different people, but to me, it meant that once a month my uncle would get sick. And sometimes he'd be so sick my family needed to chain him to a post so he wouldn't hurt himself or anyone else. My mom took me upstairs and explained this to me in a more child-friendly manner. She sat me down and established the rules of the house. These rules only applied at night. Once the sun started to set, the kids had to be brought inside and taken upstairs. We were to keep the bedroom door locked, but should open it for anyone other than Uncle Red. Don't go outside unsupervised, and no matter how much Uncle Red begs, we must not unchain him from the post. Not every night would be the same for Uncle Red. Some nights I'd wake to the sounds of him screaming and howling, the panicked yells of my uncles and my parents. Other nights would be quiet and peaceful. None of us knew what would trigger the urges in him, and I don't honestly think he knew either. For the most part, I don't think he remembered much of what happened when the wolf brain took over, but once he described the pre-blackout feeling to my mom being a bubbling sensation. I feel bad now thinking back on the situation because we would avoid talking or looking at Uncle Red. He scared us, and neither my cousins nor I knew how to process our feelings about him. Until that summer, a visit from Uncle Red meant fishing trips, hiking, fun in the great outdoors, but things had changed and Uncle Red knew that. The longer we stayed in the guest house, the more withdrawn from us he'd become. I don't think we realized the true effect this would have on him until the 4th of July. The 4th of July would be the first night we'd stay out past sundown. My Uncle Dan had made a supply run into town and brought back fireworks, nothing big or showy, small ones. Uncle Red spent most of the day to himself, assuring everyone he felt fine, better than he'd felt since he'd got here. Night came and Uncle Dan got out the fireworks. We had polished off a pack of Whistling Pete's when my aunt lost sight of Uncle Red. While everyone had been preoccupied, he managed to slip off into the woods. My aunt gathered my cousins and I together while everyone else searched for him. My aunt led us into the house, through the front door, and towards the stairway. Uncle Red had come in through the back French door's haunchette over, pawing at his head. We ran upstairs and locked the door behind us. Huddled in the corner of my aunt's bed, we listened to Uncle Red scratch at the door. He'd mumble and groan before he would slam himself against the door. His moans and whimpers devolved into screams. The rest of the family heard the sounds and rushed inside. Soon Uncle Red was detained and tied back to his post. I left the house the next day. My parents sent me to stay with some friends who had moved out of town, and I was not to talk about my time in the guest house. I haven't seen Uncle Red since, and to be honest with you, I have no interest. I think the wolf in Uncle Red's brain meant to eat us that night. My girlfriend and I stayed in the house, and so much time had passed I barely recognized the place. The family had redecorated the whole house and had begun renting it out to skiers. I still don't know how to feel about my experience, but writing this out has helped me process things better. I hope wherever my uncle is that he's safe and protected.